So as I said, my name's Stephen Pulliam. I teach at Delaware County Christian School in Newtown Square, Pennsylvania. And I've been an AP Insight presenter for 2 or 3 years now. I've also worked with the College Board grading AP exams, goodness, for quite a number of years. Like, off the top of my head, I can't tell you how many. It's been a little while. And so hopefully tonight I'm able to point you in some right directions. I think Audra Ward is also on the line with us. She works directly for the College Board, specifically helping create these presentations for us. So I assume Audra is going to be here for most, if not all, of this presentation tonight. So just some ground rules here. Since it's kind of a one-way audio conversation, we're going to live in that chat screen to the right. And so questions that you have, you can put there. If you click on your name on the left, there is a way to kind of raise your hand. Sorry, that's at the top of your screen. There's a way to raise your hand to kind of grab my attention if you have a question. Go for that, or just put it in the chat screen, and I promise that I'll try to get to it in reasonable amount of time throughout our discussion tonight. So this really is a time for all of us to share. Now, I know that many of us are new with AP Insight, and so you may just be more on the receiving end, but feel free to ask a lot of questions tonight. So Todd, I assume you've used AP Insight quite a bit. Is that right? Great. So you'll be able to add to our discussion as well. Okay. So again, I said initially that we're kind of assuming that you've completed your challenge area roadmap, which is stuff you would have walked through in that Welcome to AP Insight webinar. So don't worry about that right now if you don't even know what a challenge area roadmap is. And don't worry also if you don't have a basic working knowledge of the platform. I'll try to go slow enough. There are so few of us here tonight that I think we've got a little bit of wiggle room in terms of time. So my hope is that after our training today, you'll know what a building block quiz is. You'll know how to use the score report. And you'll know how to help that kind of inform your instruction and assessments later on in your course. And then at the end, we'll talk about ways that you can engage with your colleagues in a professional learning community that the College Board has set up just for AP Insight. And so that's a pretty valuable resource as well. And we'll look at that a little bit at the end of our discussion tonight. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into building block quizzes. We're going to look at those reports and figure out what they can tell us. What do they mean? And then how can we use them? We're going to respond to those. And so again, that chat box on the right, feel free, dive in, ask lots of questions. So Great, Todd, I see that question there, so I'll pause here. What are the building blocks before we get going? So every challenge area that's been identified by the College Board through lots of data collection from grading AP exams, from talking with teachers and college professors to try to find those areas where students struggle. AP Insight helps us address those struggles, and they do that through a host of resources on AP Insight. One of those resources is a building block quiz, and it tries to break those challenge areas down into more manageable chunks so that if your class or a particular student is struggling with area A, and the other half of the class isn't struggling with area A, you might be able to just tailor some of that instruction toward the students and not have everybody go through this if you, the teacher, don't deem it necessary. So it's just smaller bite-size building blocks, for lack of a more creative term than what the College Board's already come up with. And so we're going to look at a particular building block tonight, or a particular challenge area, and then a particular building block quiz. So, but before we get started, and I think probably in the chat box you guys have already answered this question, where are you with AP Insight? And so you've got multiple choice responses there. If you could just give an A, B, C, D, or A, B, or C, or D there. Okay, so we've got a range. We've got a range. So again, don't feel like you're the, well, you might be the only one asking the question tonight because there's only 4 of us. But feel free to ask that question. Don't hesitate to do that. So when you dive into the website, you've got the 4 sort of main tabs at the top: prepare, teach, assess, and act. And we're going to focus on the assess tab tonight. And in that assess tab, we want to know if our students are understanding what we've been teaching. And hopefully what they're specifically struggling with. We may have a vague idea of, I'm not really sure if they're getting this, but these building block quizzes really help us to drill down and be a little more specific in exactly what area they're struggling with. All right, on the AP exam, students need to be able to apply knowledge and skills, not just memorize facts. And these building block quizzes are designed to really challenge them to apply their knowledge. Those reports and those quizzes help the teacher and the student kind of diagnose any of those misunderstandings that a student might have. All right, and that, to me, the reports are really the power of this resource, because it puts it can really put the learning, the responsibility for learning, square in the lap of the student, right? And they really have to take ownership of it, and this gives them the tools to do that. And you'll see that as we dive in here. It gives them some next steps to do when they missed question number 1 on the quiz. You know, traditionally they might come to us and be like, well, all right, what do I do next? You know, they don't even know where to go. This gives them those tools, and it kind of multiplies our time as teachers, where we may not always have to answer that question. And we all know that some kids need a little more help and a little more direction and guidance, but some kids just need a little nudge, a little pointing in the right direction, and they're kind of off and running with it. So here's one of the questions from the building block quizzes, and there's 3 or 4 more slides, and if you have that handout, let's see, what did we title that handout here? I guess it's the participant handout. These questions are there for you, and maybe you can read them. Maybe you can't read them on the screen now. But if you would take just 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, go through those 4 questions, and these are questions from an actual building block quiz, Early Atomic Models. Take a few minutes, answer them. I'm not really concerned about the answers right now, but what I'm concerned, what we want to focus on here is answering 2 questions. What are these questions asking students to do? And which student struggles are addressed by this particular quiz? So take a few minutes, have at it with those questions, be thinking about what these questions are asking students to do, and specifically maybe what struggles students are having. And so as you begin answering those questions, you can throw those answers in the chat box, You can save it all till the end of those 4 questions if you want. And also, if you could share how long you've been teaching AP, that's going to help us with this discussion tonight as well. So Lorianne, welcome to AP Chem, and this being your first year. So you may have a tough time answering question number 2 for these, right? Which student struggles are addressed, because you've not been down this road before. And so feel free to just eavesdrop on this part of the conversation. Although if you've been teaching chemistry, perhaps you could anticipate areas here where the students are going to struggle. So Todd and Anna Maria, we're really going to be leaning on you guys in this discussion tonight. You've got the experience. You've seen where students struggle, and so we hope to hear a lot from you guys. So Todd and Anna Maria, I think you guys are hitting on something that's crucial here, right? They're having trouble linking, as Todd said, and then Anna Maria, you said students often wonder why they have to know this if they've never seen a mass spec before, right? And so I think that's one of the hurdles they have to overcome, right? Maybe they've never seen this before, but we're trying to give them the skills to interpret data that they've been given and then apply it, right? They want to determine if the model that they're being shown is consistent with the data, right? Whether or not they've seen it from this perspective before. Yeah, Lorianne, students they just want to give us the facts most of the time, and sometimes getting them to go that extra step toward application is like a trip to the dentist, and you know, they would they just don't want to do it sometimes. You know, either because they've not been trained, right? It's not been an emphasis in previous classes, or if it's just hard. And sometimes we shy away from those things that are hard and are, you know, we know the facts, but going beyond that is tough. Right, Todd, I agree. They do struggle with the idea of models, especially when they've got to use a model and then justify some reasoning, something based on that model. Right, that's that AP question of, is it this, or this? Please explain. Right, and they don't like that explain. They just want to do does it increase, decrease, or remain the same? Right, analyzing data to see if it's reasonable. Right, they like the patterns, they like the trends, but then when it doesn't fit the pattern of the trend, what do? How do they handle that? And I think in these questions, it's a little bit mind bending. They have to be thinking clearly because they're trying to disprove parts of or support Dalton's model of the atom, and I think that in and of itself can get a little confusing because some of his statements have been modified, and so keeping all of that straight in their head, I think, can be challenging sometimes. So I want to go back up to Anna Maria's question back at the beginning of this discussion, where she asked, do we recommend that we assign them electronically or on paper? And then I'll circle back around to the end of the discussion. I think it kind of depends on your situation. If your students have access to the technology, do them electronically. It takes a little bit of the burden off you as a teacher. If they don't have the technology, you can certainly print them out. You're going to score them, and then you're going to input that data or scan them in and upload the scanned files to AP Insight so that they can get the feedback. So it really depends on the situation, and as Todd said here at the end, he's done both. And you can do both, I think, within even one assignment. Right? If a student doesn't have access to technology at home and some of the others do, you can give a paper copy, but that's going to end up being a little more work on your end in order to maximize the benefit for you, the teacher, with the score reports and for the student. So do you recommend in class or at home? If this is a formative assessment, which is kind of how it's designed to be used, it kind of doesn't matter, but it's then going to depend on the personality of your class. The way I've used this somewhat successfully, I've used it somewhat for review for the AP exam, and so initially I gave them a grade. And they could do it at home or at school. It didn't matter to me. But then they could earn that credit back by going through what's called the next steps, which we'll get to in just a few minutes. I made it a minimal grade, but I wanted there to be enough incentive for them to get it done and to take it seriously. But I also wanted to maximize the learning, and I wanted them to take the risks and to think and to feel free to do that. So Anna Maria, I've done both. I use them during the school year, and I may not use them all. And that's some of the beauty of the program is that you can pick and choose. And if there are some that I haven't used, or even if I've used them before, I can reassign them then as review closer to May. Really hoping that if they didn't fill in all the gaps in their knowledge and skills in the beginning of the year, that it all comes together hopefully at the end when they're kind of re-quizzing and re-preparing. Yes, Lorianne, I do teach the honors and the AP. I've got an interesting situation. We're a small school. There's only one other gentleman that teaches chemistry, and he's a very new teacher. And so kind of our philosophy is that the kids who are taking the honors level are going to go on to take AP, and we kind of want to make sure that they're really well prepared to accept the challenges of AP. So I teach the honors because I know what these kids are going to face at the next level. It's not to say that the other teacher is not good at what he does. He's just a new teacher. This is his second year teaching, and he doesn't know what to expect on the AP exam. So, Lorianne, did you go to the training in Delaware? Great. I'm sure that was invaluable. When I first started teaching AP Chem and I went to the week-long summer institute, I felt like I was drinking AP Chemistry from a fire hose. Some of it went in, but I mostly left all covered in AP Chem. But the things that I did and learned there, I found to be invaluable in terms of teaching the course. I've heard that the Luz Summer Institute is fantastic, not only because of what you learn there, but because it's a beautiful setting. So I think we've done a pretty good job at identifying not only what these questions are asking the students to know or to do, but also identifying some of those student struggles. And so let's keep going through this presentation unless there are some any other last-minute questions before we move on a little bit. Is it I guess it's a lag in my audio. Or is the text in the chat also lagging? So if it's with the text and the audio, just feel free to hit that raised hand button just to get my attention and our attention to kind of slow down a little bit maybe. If If you see that kind of way up at the top of your screen there, the little person kind of looks like he's waving at you. So you guys have gone through those 4 questions. And I think we've had a pretty good discussion on what these questions are asking students to know and be able to do. So let's get into some of the nuts and bolts here. Go a little bit behind the scenes maybe. Not really behind the scenes, because you, the teacher, can always go there. All right, but talk a little bit about how the building block quizzes are going to connect back to the curriculum framework. All right, all of the building block quiz questions do connect back to the use of skills, those science practices, and certainly to content. All right, and so as we move on, and on this page, there's lots of good stuff here to guide our planning and teaching. I know we've all done our syllabus and gotten the stamp of approval from the College Board, and we've looked at all those learning objectives and those science practices, and maybe we're using those to guide our teaching to a certain degree, but also looking at those in the context of building block quizzes is really helpful. And so the alignment here, right, comes from that enduring understanding that atoms are so small that they're difficult to study directly. Atomic models are constructed to explain experimental data on collections of atoms. All right, and then the alignment to the AP exam down below, where there are those science practices. The student can use representations and models to analyze situations or solve problems, qualitatively or quantitatively. And that certainly connects to the questions that you looked through on that building block quiz. So I see a question here. What do you guys use as regular questions on a daily basis? And so, Anna Maria, do you mean for tests, for quizzes, for formative assessment within a particular topic? So like Todd, I've spent a lot of time with old AP exams, and I try to use those as much as I can within particular topics. I'm also a big fan of the POGIL activities that are available from Flynn or from various other authors. Just Google AP Chemistry POGIL exercises or POGIL worksheets, POGIL. And I really like those, and I like the way that those exercises tend to, take students from analyzing the model to pulling out the facts from the model to answering more kind of analytical and challenging questions as they go. Todd, just blame the spelling on autocorrect. They might struggle initially with those POGILs, but I think you can develop that culture of thinking through it. When I first started using those, I know that my students were resistant because they were so focused on the right answer that they would sometimes forget to think, and go back to the model and pull out either information that they knew before or information that was right there on the page. Sometimes they would read the questions and think, the answer can't be that simple, can it? And sometimes it is. And Anna Maria, I will say this: all POGIL activities are not created equal. I know in in AP Insight there are the challenge area resources. There are some POGIL-like activities that are really good and that directly address these challenge areas. And so as you dive into AP Insight more, take a look at those because I've found those to be helpful as well. And then the discussion that you can have with your students after that as they kind of report back their answers really can help them, kind of solidify their understanding quite a bit. So let's take a look at this building block quiz score report here. And so this is some sample data for the quiz that you guys just read through for the chemistry demo class. And so you look at this screen, and it's all color-coded and nice for you. Green we like. Yellow's okay too. We're on our way to making the connections. Red, we really need to pause and look deeply at the red and address some of those concerns there. So green is good, go. Yellow, maybe not so much. Red, definitely let's all drill down, get the students to drill down on those and see what's going on. So this, when you go into the where you would assign the quiz, you can see a results tab. You'll click on the results and you can drill down to this quiz, and this is kind of the first report that you see. From this report, you can see that we're looking at the class performance, and that's overall. Underneath that is student performance, and we can drill down and see how individual students did. And so let me back up for a second. You can see the red circle there. That's the overall student understanding of the building block. So only one student was green, 6, if I can read that right, were yellow, and 3 were in the red. And so great on that one student, but we've got 9 students that have some gaps in their understanding. Right, and we can see then question by question how it panned out. Right, and there's no yellow in that question by question, so it was kind of a feast or famine here, it seems like, for some of the students. So when we click on student performance, now we're going to see how each student in our class did on each question. Right, that first student there got the first question wrong, but then got the next 3 questions right. All right, so the green means they got it correct, and then the pink, if I'm calling that the right color, indicates that they didn't get it correct. And we can drill down farther into that as well. So when we click on a student names, or we're back at student performance here, we can click on one of the questions. And so question 1 was determine Dalton versus the lead mass spec data. And so when we click on that, it brings up kind of the overall student answers for that question. So 3 students chose A, 0 students chose B. Looks like 6 students got it right, which is great. And then 1 student chose D. And so as you click on each of those answer choices, down below here, if they chose A, there's a description of this suggests the student doesn't understand this. However, the student might understand this. It gives you kind of an analysis trying to think through why a student would choose A and what they did or didn't understand about the question. And you'll also notice up here on the right some recommended next steps based on their results to that question. And so students will see this report for themselves as well. And so there's a process laid out for you to kind of work them through the next steps and for them to kind of report back on what they've, what they're learning and why they think they got it wrong and now what the right answer is. And so the score reports really lay out which ones are the most difficult, and then you, the teacher, can look at that and modify things right away, and maybe you need to reteach a topic, and or definitely modify it for the following year because something went on maybe in the way you presented the material that didn't help the students make those connections. And so this can really inform the way we're teaching as well. So Anna Maria, let me try to address your question first here, and then I'll see if I can get to Todd's. I noticed that the SI isotope info, do they have access to that? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. So the students will see their own score report. They'll be able to see, what their answer was, what the right answer was, and then that recommended next steps section. And so in my class, they had to complete the next steps in order to earn back credit for the question. I know they should want to do that and learn that for the sake of learning and for the sake of knowing it on the AP exam, but sometimes they need that extra little incentive to actually go through and do it. And we'll go through a little bit more of the next steps details and process in just a few minutes. I assume so. Everybody's students are the same to a certain extent. So here on the screen now, we've clicked on answer choice B, which none of the students, if I'm reading that screen right, chose. And the information at the bottom down below here is different now. Delaware County students they might be unique. All right, now we drill down to answer choice C on question 1. All right, so this is the good news, right? This is what every student wants to read and what every teacher wants to read, right? This answer suggests that the student understands. All right, this suggests the ability to determine if the model is consistent with mass spectrometry and data and when given information about Dalton's model of the atom. So for each of those answer choices, it tries to tell you, however accurate that can be, right? Here's what they understand, here's what they don't. Here's what their misconception might be, so that you can help target that with them and they can as well. And so this screen is just also answer choice D. Yeah, Todd, I agree. This is great to help us when we're grading, right? I mean, so many times we just grade just to get it done, and we don't have time to give the feedback that we would want to give. And so this again multiplies our time in that respect, because this gives the students that feedback that we can't always give them. And it gives us data, gives us information to do it better, or maybe then in class to specifically address those misconceptions, right? 3 students answered A. And so maybe their misconceptions are the same. So maybe we can group them together, spend some time with those 3 students, and help address their misunderstandings without having to deal with the 6 students that got it right that don't necessarily need to go back through this question. So how do we respond then? Right? We've seen all this information. How do we respond to this? Well, it's that ACT tab on the AP Insight website, right? There's Prepare, that's where we do our planning. There's Teach, right? That's some resources to help us in our teaching. There's Assess, that's those building block quizzes, and Challenge Area, and other resources. Then there's the ACT tab. What do we do now that we have all of this information? Right, and this is probably that one step that gets sort of squeezed out of our teaching because we've got to get to that next topic, right? Okay, they got a 80 on the test. We've got to move on. We wish we could stop, help fill in the gaps, but we know how pressed we are for time sometimes. This helps us with that. This kind of makes it a two-way street between the teacher and the student because it gives the resources are in their lap as well. They're not waiting on us to hear what they can do next. So they're the next steps guides, and if you're logged into AP Insight and you choose the building block, let's see, let me go there so I speak the right things here. If you select Challenge Area under Big Idea, Evaluate Scientific Models for Atomic Structure, and then click on the ACT tab, actually any of the challenge areas will do, you'll see the building block next steps guide. If you don't know what I'm talking about, and that's okay if you don't, there's also a PDF of that down below in the reading materials section. And so if you would just take a look at that, it's kind of a generic form that the students can fill out to kind of help them think through the process of, all right, question number 1, this is what I didn't get it right. Here's my reflection on why I didn't get it right and why the right answer is the right answer. And so having them think through that, I think, is really valuable, right? For them to get the self-awareness of, why I didn't get that question wrong, right? It wasn't just because I just didn't know it, right? They can target that specifically by using the score reports, and then they're interacting with it as they complete the next steps guide. There's a teacher version of it that has some answers maybe pre-populated in there just to give you an idea of what to expect, but it probably will be different for every student that you have. Right? They may answer it differently. Their needs, their reflections are going to be different. But later down in that document, they have to commit to doing those next steps, and so that there's some documentation there for you if you need that of, well, did you do the next steps to try to help figure this out? And it really, again, puts that responsibility squarely on them. Right? You're giving them the resources. You're allowing them to see how they did on the test. The feedback is there for them, and so you're leading them to water in this respect. You're not leaving them there by themselves, but you're leading them to where they can find more information. So during the school year, Todd, I try to have them complete this, just because it's a good exercise for them to think through. When I did this as review, I didn't have them do this as much because it was getting down to crunch time, but I did have them go through the next steps from the score reports, and they had to submit to me a rough version of this. Here's the right answer. Here's why it's right. because I wanted them digging back through that material. I wanted to maximize their review time. And so Lorianne and Anna Maria, as you get into AP Insight, this should be a tool that you can use. It's not going to replace what you do. It's going to enhance what you do. And it's sort of a buffet. You can pick and choose a little bit what's going to fit in your class. Right? This isn't the College Board saying you have to do it this way. Right? They're not prescribing how to do this. It's just, these are the resources. You're the professional. Use them as best you can and in whatever way you see is going to fit with the way you do class. So Todd, how have you used the next steps in your class? And have your students found that to be beneficial, or do they kind of look at it as, why are you making us do this? Yeah, my students were really happy to be able to earn credit back through this, and so I also think they were able to identify that it did help them improve their understanding. So Anna Maria, I assume you're talking about maybe on the AP exam in general, or are you talking on these building block quizzes? You know, if we're talking about the AP exam, a minute to 2 minutes. So most of the time I assigned these, they did them at home, and so I don't really have any idea how long it took them to do it. I would hope it would just be a minute to 2 minutes, maybe 3, depending on the question. And I told them, I said, if you guys need to go outside to find resources to answer this question, go for it. Just don't ask your friend, hey, what'd you put for number 1? Because then that's really defeating the purpose of this quiz. I like how you phrased that, for test endurance, because we are kind of preparing them to run a marathon here. And so, there is a little bit of training that goes on, a little bit of conditioning that goes on. They've got to think clearly and quickly sometimes. I've not used the Flynn prep course at all. I've always been curious about it, but I've never used it. I will say this, and not just because I'm the College Board guy on the presentation, but I do like, in those AP review books and other courses, sometimes the quality of those questions are not really AP standard. But what you're going to get in AP Insight, you can be confident that they are like what's going to be on the AP exam. I think the review books are getting better, but I think they have kind of lagged behind the redesign of the test, just because they don't have, a whole lot of access to the type of questions that are being asked. And whereas you, the teacher, have access to old exams on the audit site. And so definitely use those. Keep them secure, of course, but definitely use that content in your classes. So other ways you could use that next steps guide, maybe you do it as a whole group activity. And maybe the first time you're sort of modeling that process for them, right? So that they understand what it might look like to reflect on, what they knew and what they, why they got it right, why they got it wrong, what they might have been thinking. And you can do that as a whole group activity, or, you can group the students together and, all right, everybody who missed question 1, you're in this group. Everybody who question 3, you're in this group. And they can work, collaboratively that way. I've not seen Adrian Dingle's review book, but I know he's a loud voice in the arena, so to speak. And his stuff that he used to give away for free on his website was very good. So Anna Maria, I would say start with the resources that you have directly from College Board, and then build from there. You'll be able to modify some of the other types of questions and begin to write your own once you get a feel for how the College Board is asking their questions. Because, being real here, they've got to get used to the way the College Board asks the questions, right? They've got to be able to anticipate, what to do when they see mass spec data, and maybe they haven't seen that before in their class. So what happens when they bomb the tests? Well, I've actually changed my approach on that. One of the things I used to do, I used to say, all right, I'm going to give you guys more tests than you can handle in the time I'm giving you to do it. And then I would give them a significant curve, thinking that I was kind of modeling it after the AP exam. I've recently switched that to say, I'm still going to give you more tests than you can do in the amount of time, but you can earn a significant amount of credit back by rewriting it with me. And you can't take it home. You can't work on it with your friends. You can work with me and ask me questions, but that's it. You could use outside resources if you want, but it has to be, in the room with me. Well, we've had one test, and so far everybody's shown up. And if they don't show up, when I give them back the initial test, I give them their actual raw score, and then the other score is, here's what it could be if you do all the rewrites and get them all right. And for those students who, and mostly it's the motivated students that are going to do AP, right? They see those two options, and they're motivated, right? They would like to have that higher grade. And so I put it right there in front of them. Here's what it could go up to if you come back and do all of this with me. And so getting them to rewrite it, and not just tell me the right answer, they've got to tell me why what they're thinking, where the error was in their thinking, and why the right answer, why it's C on the multiple choice, why C is the right answer. So whatever incentive you can give them and sometimes grades aren't enough. But have it once they see the value, if not in just the grade, but in the understanding, and maybe even in building that relationship with you and knowing that you are for them, right? Because working one-on-one with a student, they get the idea that you're for them more than just when you're teaching the class. I don't let them keep their tests. Some because they've got questions on there that I'm not supposed to let out in the wild. Some because I'm going to reuse those questions and I know that students are going to pass things down from one year to the next. Yeah, there's not one right answer there. That's just my philosophy. Todd, you must have more time than I do. So the next thing I want us to kind of figure out is, well, how do we know when it's time to give a building block quiz? And we've kind of talked around this a little bit. So I give mine some for review. I give mine some when I feel like we've gone through the content where it's appropriate. Well, I'm really jealous of the amount of time you guys have for your classes. That would be a luxury. It would be a luxury. I basically see them 4 times a week for 45 minutes each. It doesn't quite play out that way. We do have a block period in there, so I get them for 90 minutes one of those days, but then the other 2 days, I really only see them 3 days. Right, so 2 45s and a 90. So on this next topic here, how do we know when to give a building block quiz? In the AP Insight window that you have open, if you'd click on the Teach tab and look at the student progress sheet. That's also in the reading materials down below within the webinar window here. So I'm just waiting a second to open mine up. Maybe yours is taking as long as mine is too. And so there's a teacher version and a student version, and you can see the different icons there. The little, I'll call it purple, symbol in the bottom indicates a teacher edition, and the little orange symbol indicates a student edition. And so the student progress report is another way to get some feedback in sort of a non-threatening way. There's some misunderstanding checks for the students, and they can go through those questions. And if you've opened that document, you can see the questions they're being asked. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why or why not? And that's kind of food for discussion in class. And so this formative assessment might help you determine, yeah, okay, we're ready for this building block quiz. We're ready or we're not ready for this building block quiz. We need to do a little bit more. And it's always that balancing act of how much time can I spend on this topic because I know I've got 100 other topics to get through before the exam in May. And so I have not used these progress sheets very much. Todd, maybe you have. And if you have, if you could, well, okay, you haven't. So, but I do see the value in them. But if I had all the time in the world, I could definitely use those and use them really well. I think it's it's another way for students to in that non-threatening way get an idea of what they know and what they don't know, which I think it can be motivational for them. Right? Nobody wants to find out on the chapter test what they didn't know. Right? You don't want to find that out. They really don't want to find that out. They would rather know everything then, and I would rather them know everything then by the time they get to that test. Right? And so using those to, as Todd says, to pair them to your lesson planning. Another way to inform your instruction. Right? You have your students fill these out in a quick 5-minute, check at the beginning or end of class, and you can use that to inform your instruction the next day. So we've got another discussion question here, and Todd, you and I are the veteran AP Insight users, and maybe we've already shared these things enough already. So let me open it up for some more questions too. Maybe we haven't shared enough and hit these things, and Lorianne and Anna Maria, I want to make sure that we do before we're done here this evening. I think all three of you make very good points there, in that those, using the learning objectives, as Todd said, using the student progress reports as an exit ticket or a closure to the lesson is great. Even if it's open note, however you want to do that, you want to make sure that they know what they're doing, and that kind of formative assessment can be very valuable. Right, and maybe even using the student progress sheets as some kind of other quiz. Sure. Anything that gives us and them feedback on how they're doing, I think can be great. The challenge is always to get them to take it seriously, especially if there's not the carrot in front of them of a grade. And that's probably existed since that challenge has existed since the beginning of school, and will probably always exist. And everybody's solution will be different because everybody's students are different. Yeah, I'm glad to see you guys popping up with ideas of how to use this, how to use all these resources. And particularly if you're new to AP and you're sort of building that toolbox of resources, this is great for you. Now, it doesn't cover everything. Remember that it just helps address those challenge areas. So there will be some gaps in the main content versus this, but these areas, the challenge areas, are pretty broad. So the student progress report probably is something I would do before the building block quiz, just as a let's see if we're really ready before we raise the stakes on this. Have we covered the material? Have you understood the material? Not just can you tell me the facts back, but do you really understand it? And those student progress reports, give us a glimpse into it. So what have you learned tonight that, and I know maybe Anna Maria and Lorianne, this has been, a lot of information to take in, and we've only just scratched the surface of the resources that are available to you through AP Insight. And when you go through that pre-recorded webinar, you'll get the the 50,000-foot view of all the other resources that are available to you. So one thing I would emphasize to both of you is to do that challenge area roadmap, because there's a lot of resources here, and you've got a lot of content to get through in your teaching, and that the roadmap is going to help you figure out what content there is on AP Insight and where it's going to fit into your course. And so it may take you some time to do up front, but it's really going to let you know what those resources are. I mean, after we've been teaching a while, right, we know those tools that we have in our toolbox, and we know when to pull them out just kind of intuitively. But as you're doing this for the first time, right, doing that roadmap is going to make it easier for you to know. It's going to help you sort of look ahead and give you that intuition and vision that you don't have yet because you've not used these resources. So that Welcome to AP Insight webinar walks you through a little bit how to do that. It's a pretty easy process for getting your students connected into the class. Basically, you'll give them a code, and they'll enter that in when they log in, and boom, they're right in your class, ready to go. So one other resource of AP Insight that I want to point out tonight is that professional learning community. It's a discussion board that's moderated by an experienced AP Insight teacher, and so whatever questions you have, you can throw it out there, and either that moderator is going to respond or someone else in the community is going to respond. Some valuable resources there for you to use. Call on those people. Use the community. It's good stuff. So when you get on to AP Insight, there is in the upper right-hand corner, it's called Discussions. And that's how you get to that professional learning community that, again, is moderated. And you'll find, announcements there sometimes of what's coming next. Right, the top announcement that I see is register for the first PLC, which is tonight. And so I'm glad you guys did that. And again, I hope it was really, really beneficial for you. If you've got technical questions or any other questions that might need a more quick response, there's some contact information on the screen here. Email apinsight@collegeboard.org. That's a monitor email account. Technical questions, what have you, or call if it's something, an answer you need quicker than that. They're there Mondays through. I don't think they're just there on Monday. That may be a typo on the slide. I think I hope they're there for more than just an hour during the week. Right. Those details are on the AP Insight website, but definitely that email, they're there. And so check your email, check that discussion board for information about the next PLC in November as well. I'll leave that up for just another second or two so you can copy that email address and phone number down. That information is also probably in your workbook, although don't quote me on that. Yep, it is at the end of your workbook. And so one last thing that I'd ask you to do tonight is to take the survey from the College Board. It's a quick and easy survey. So workbook, by workbook I meant the handout, the 2017-18 Chemistry PLC 1 participant handout. It's about 9 pages, so I called it a workbook. So if you could take that survey, that'd be great. I'll be online here for another 5 minutes or so if you've got additional questions that come to mind. Again, feel free to put those questions also into that discussion board or to email apinsight@collegeboard.org. Thank you, guys. This was a great interaction tonight. Probably one of the more lively discussions that I've been involved in any of these PLCs. So I hope it was valuable. I hope you're not just covered in AP Insight, but that some of it made sense to you